Morning started like any other, until the mail arrived. I almost didn't notice the envelope at first, plain white, with my name typed neatly in the center. But the return address caught my eye. My lawyer's office. My heart gave a little stutter. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Callahan in months, not since we'd updated my will after Emily's wedding. I told myself it was probably routine, some paperwork or a reminder. Still, my hands trembled as I slit the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet, heavy with the weight of its words. I read the first line, then read it again, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Dear Mr. Harris, I am writing to inform you of recent developments regarding the transfer of your property and financial accounts, as requested by your daughter, Emily Harris. My breath caught. Requested by Emily? I felt a chill crawl up my spine, colder than any winter wind. I read on each sentence a blow. The letter detailed changes I hadn't authorized, documents signed, accounts accessed, decisions made in my name. My daughter's name appeared again and again, always as the initiator, the beneficiary, the one in control. I felt the room tilt, the familiar walls suddenly foreign. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the letter. For a moment, sat there in stunned silence, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. I tried to make sense of it. Emily wouldn't do this. She was my little girl, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest, who called me every Sunday, who promised to take care of me when I got old. I'd trusted her with everything. I'd never imagined I'd need to protect myself from her. But the words on the page were clear. My lawyer wouldn't lie. The signatures were real. The betrayal was real. I felt something inside me crack, a deep aching hurt I hadn't known was possible. I thought of all the years I'd worked overtime, the vacations I'd skipped, the dreams I'd set aside so Emily could have every opportunity. I thought of the nights I'd sat up worrying about her, the pride I'd felt at her graduation, the tears I'd shed at her wedding. All of it now seemed to hang in the air like a cruel joke. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, some explanation that would make it all go away. But as I read the letter again, the truth settled in my bones. My trust, my routine, my very sense of family, shattered in a single moment. I never imagined my own daughter could do this to me. But the truth was even worse than I feared. And as I sat there, clutching that letter, I realized my life would never be the same. It's strange how a single moment can cast a shadow over a lifetime of memories. As I sat there, the lawyer's letter heavy in my hands, my mind drifted back to the days when Emily was small and the world felt full of promise. I suppose that's what happens when you're blindsided by betrayal. You search for the place where things started to go wrong, hoping you'll find some clue you missed, some sign you should have seen. Emily was just 5 when her mother, my beloved Margaret, passed away. Cancer took her quickly, leaving me with a grief so sharp I could barely breathe. But I had Emily, and she needed me. I remember sitting on the edge of her bed that first night, her tiny hand clutching my finger, her eyes wide and scared. "Don't leave, Daddy," she whispered. I promised her I never would. From that day on, my life revolved around her. I learned to braid her hair, to pack her lunches just the way she liked, to sew the buttons back on her favorite dress. I worked 2 jobs, days at the hardware store, nights cleaning offices, so I could keep the house, pay the bills, and still be there for every school play and parent-teacher conference. I missed a lot of sleep, but I never missed a moment with Emily. Our home was small, but filled with laughter. Every Sunday, we'd make pancakes together, flour dusting the counters and syrup sticky on our fingers. On Christmas Eve, we'd hang Margaret's old ornaments on the tree, telling stories about the woman who loved us both so fiercely. I tried to keep her memory alive for Emily, to show her that love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. I remember the pride I felt watching Emily grow. She was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to help. She'd sit at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration as she did her homework. And I'd watch her, marveling at how much of her mother I saw in her. When she brought home her first report card, straight A's, she ran into my arms, beaming. "I did it, Daddy," she cried. I told her I'd always believed she could. There were hard times, of course. Money was tight, and there were nights when I'd lie awake worrying about how I'd pay for new shoes or a field trip. I gave up a promotion at the hardware store because it would have meant longer hours and less time with Emily. I sold my old guitar to cover the cost of her braces. I never told her about the sacrifices. I wanted her to feel safe, know she was loved above all else. As she got older, our bond only seemed to grow. We had our traditions, Friday night pizza, summer camping trips, long walks in the park where we'd talk about everything and nothing. She confided in me about her friends, her dreams, her fears. When she got her first heartbreak, she cried in my arms. And I told her that pain was just proof of how deeply she could love. I was there for every milestone. Her high school graduation, her acceptance letter to college, the day she moved into her first apartment. I helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, my back aching but my heart full. She hugged me tight before I left, whispering, "Thank you for everything." "Dad!" I drove home that night feeling like I'd done something right in this world, even as she built her own life. Emily never drifted far. She called every Sunday, just like her mother used to. She'd come home for holidays, bringing stories of her job, her friends, her hopes for the future. I was proud of the woman she was becoming, independent, ambitious, kind. I told her so every chance I got. But looking back, I can see now that things started to shift as the years went by. It was subtle at first. A missed phone call here, a shorter visit there. She started talking more about her career, her plans, the things she wanted. I was happy for her, of course, but sometimes I felt like a relic from another time, a piece of her past she didn't quite know what to do with. Still, I tried to hold on to our traditions. I'd invite her over for Sunday dinner, but she was often too busy. I'd ask about her life, but her answers grew shorter, distracted. She started bringing up the house more often, how it was getting old, how the neighborhood was changing, how it might be worth something if I ever wanted to sell. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just looking out for me. There were moments, though, when I caught a glimpse of something I couldn't quite name. A flicker of impatience, a hint of calculation in her eyes. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, she was my daughter. She loved me. She always had. But as I sat there, the lawyer's letter burning in my hands, I couldn't help but wonder when the shift had truly begun. Was it when she got that big promotion? When she started dating that man from the city, the one who always seemed to look right through me? Or was it simply the slow, inevitable drift that happens when children grow up and parents grow old? The memories of our laughter, our traditions, our shared dreams, they felt distant now, like echoes from another life. The warmth and hope of the past stood in stark contrast to the cold uncertainty of the present. I wanted to believe that the bond we'd built could withstand anything, but the evidence in front of me told a different story. As the sun dipped below the trees outside my window, I realized that the world I'd known, the world I'd built for Emily and me, was slipping away. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd given too much. If I'd loved too blindly, if I'd missed the warning signs that now seemed so obvious. But even as doubt crept in, I couldn't let go of the hope that somewhere, beneath the hurt and the confusion, the daughter I'd raised was still there. I just had to find a way to reach her, or if I couldn't, to find a way to protect what little I had left. It's easy to look back and see the cracks that were forming. But at the time, I was too busy patching them up to notice how deep they ran. After all those years of closeness, I wanted to believe that Emily and I were still the same, father and daughter, a team against the world. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with the little things. Emily's calls became less frequent, and when she did ring, her voice was often distracted, her mind elsewhere. She'd rush through our conversations, apologizing for being busy, promising to call again soon. I told myself it was just the demands of her new job, the pressures of adulthood. I didn't want to be the kind of father who clung too tightly, so I'd let her go, trusting that she'd come back when she could. But the distance grew. She stopped asking for my advice, started making decisions without telling me. I'd hear about big changes, her move to a new apartment, her decision to invest in a business venture from mutual friends, or worse, from social media. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off, saying, "Oh, Dad, I didn't want to bother you with all the details. You wouldn't really understand anyway. The words stung. But I swallowed my pride and told her I was proud of her independence. Then there were the comments. Small, sharp, and easy to miss if you weren't listening for them. She'd joke about my old-fashioned ways, roll her eyes when I talked about saving money or fixing things myself. Once, when I offered to help her with her taxes, she smiled and said, "Thanks, Dad, but I have a real accountant now." I laughed along. Pretending it didn't hurt, I noticed, too, how her priorities seemed to shift. She talked more about money, about promotions and bonuses, about the kind of life she wanted to build. She started bringing up the house more often, asking about its value. Hinting at renovations or selling it when the time is right, I tried to steer the conversation back to memories, to the life we'd shared within those walls, but she seemed impatient. Eager to move on to bigger things, at family gatherings, she'd arrive late and leave early. Always with an excuse, an important meeting, a dinner with clients, a weekend trip she couldn't reschedule. She'd bring gifts, expensive and impersonal, as if trying to buy forgiveness for her absence. I missed the days when she'd sit beside me on the porch, sharing stories and dreams. Content just to be together. There were moments when I caught her looking at me with something like pity or maybe annoyance. She'd sigh when I asked for help with the computer or when I forgot the name of one of her friends. "Don't worry about it, Dad," she'd say, her tone gentle but dismissive. "I'll take care of it." I wanted to believe she was just busy, just growing up, but a part of me wondered if she saw me as a burden, as an obstacle in the path of her new life. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself that every family goes through rough patches, that Emily was just finding her way. I reminded myself of all the good years, all the love we'd shared. I tried to ignore the slights, to forgive the distance, to believe that things would get better if I just gave her time. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. The missed calls, the dismissive comments, the growing obsession with money and status, they were all warnings, flashing red lights I chose not to see. I wanted so badly to believe in my daughter, to trust that our bond was unbreakable, but nothing could have prepared me for what was coming. I must have read that letter a dozen times, each word cutting deeper than the last. The language was cold, clinical, just facts and signatures, dates and legal terms. But beneath the formality, I could see the truth as plain as day. Emily had gone behind my back, using my trust as a weapon. She'd met with my lawyer, presented documents I'd never seen, and convinced him somehow that I'd agreed to transfer control of my house, my savings, and even the small inheritance I'd set aside for her future. All of it now was in her name. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands, and tried to make sense of it. My mind raced through every conversation, every moment we'd shared in the past year. Had she been planning this all along? Was every visit, every phone call, just a step in her scheme? I wanted to believe there was some mistake, some misunderstanding that could be explained away. But the evidence was right there in black and white. My signature, forged or coerced, on documents I'd never agreed to sign. The betrayal was total. I felt stripped bare, exposed in a way I'd never known. I thought of the house, the one Margaret and I had bought together, the one where Emily had taken her first steps, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where laughter and love had filled every room. I'd always imagined leaving it to her, a final gift, a symbol of everything we'd built together, but not like this. Not stolen, not taken, without a word. My savings, 2 years of careful budgeting, of skipped luxuries and quiet sacrifices. I'd put away every spare dollar, not for myself, but for Emily's future. I wanted her to have choices, to be free from the worries that had haunted me. Now it was all gone, swept away by a single act of betrayal. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen her, really seen her. She'd come by the house, breezing in with her usual whirlwind of energy, talking about work and travel and the latest investment opportunity. She'd hugged me, distracted, her eyes already on her phone. I'd offered to make her tea, but she'd declined, saying she was in a hurry. I remember thinking how grown-up she seemed, how far she'd come from the little girl who used to beg for bedtime stories. I never imagined that visit would be the last time I'd see her as my daughter, not just a stranger with my blood. The pain was overwhelming. I felt foolish, naive, like an old man who'd been played for a fool. I thought of all the times I'd defended her, all the excuses I'd made for her distance, her sharp words, her obsession with money. I'd told myself she was just busy, just ambitious, just trying to make her way in the world. I never wanted to believe she was capable of this, but the truth was undeniable. She'd chosen her path, and it led straight through my heart. I wondered what Margaret would say if she were here. She'd always believed the best in people, always urged me to forgive, to see the good. But even she would have been shaken by this for a long time. I just sat there, staring at the letter, the world spinning around me. I thought about calling Emily, demanding an explanation. But what would I say? What could she possibly say to make this right? The trust between us was broken, shattered beyond repair, as the hours passed. The initial shock gave way to something else, a slow, simmering anger, a determination I hadn't felt in years. I realized that I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I couldn't let her betrayal define the rest of my life. I'd spent too many years sacrificing, giving, loving without reservation. I deserved better than this. Margaret had always told me that dignity was something you had to fight for, even when it hurt. I stood up, the letter still in my hand, and looked around the house. Every photo, every piece of furniture, every memory was a testament to the life I'd built. I wasn't ready to let it all be taken from me, not by anyone, certainly not by my own flesh and blood. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily was clever, resourceful, and now she had the law on her side. But I had something she didn't, years of experience, a stubborn streak, and a deep well of love that, while wounded, was not yet empty. I would fight for what was mine, not out of spite, but out of a need to reclaim my dignity, to remind myself, and her, of the values that once bound us together. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and began to make a plan. I would call Mr. Callahan, demand a meeting, and get to the bottom of what had happened. I would gather every document, every scrap of evidence, and prepare to fight for my home, my savings, my future. I would not go quietly into the night, not after everything I'd given. The heartbreak was still there, raw and aching, but beneath it, a new resolve was taking root. I would not let betrayal be the final chapter of my life. I would find a way to set things right, no matter what it took. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letter from my lawyer resting on the nightstand, like a silent accusation. My mind wandered through the years, replaying moments I'd thought were long buried. Emily's first steps, her laughter echoing through the house, the way she'd cling to my hand when she was scared. I'd given her everything I had, every ounce of love and patience, every sacrifice I could make. Now I wondered if it had all been for nothing. I thought about the choices I'd made. The dreams I'd set aside so Emily could chase hers. I remembered the nights I'd come home bone-tired, only to find her waiting up for me, eager to share her day. I'd always believed that love meant giving without expecting anything in return. But as I lay there, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me, I couldn't help but question if I'd given too much, if, in my devotion, I taught her to take me for granted. Was it my fault? Had I failed as a father? The questions gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. I'd tried to be both mother and father, to fill every gap Margaret left behind. I'd tried to shield Emily from pain, to make her life easier than mine had ever been. But maybe, in doing so, I'd made her believe that love was something owed, not earned. Maybe I'd blurred the line between generosity and self-neglect. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Margaret years ago when Emily was still a toddler. We'd been sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, Emily asleep in her crib. Margaret had taken my hand and said, "You know, love isn't just about giving. It's about teaching, too. Teaching them how to respect, how to appreciate, how to stand on their own 2 feet. If you give everything and ask for nothing, you risk losing yourself and teaching them to do the same." At the time, I'd brushed it off, thinking I understood what she meant. But now, her words echoed in my mind, clearer than ever. I realized I'd spent so many years trying to protect Emily from the world that I'd forgotten to protect myself. I'd let my boundaries slip, let my needs fade into the background, all in the name of love. And now, I was paying the price. The pain of her betrayal was sharp, but beneath it was a deeper ache, a sense of having lost myself somewhere along the way. I missed the man I used to be, the one who stood tall and proud, who knew his worth. I wanted to find him again, to reclaim the dignity I'd let slip through my fingers as the hours passed. My sorrow slowly gave way to something else, a quiet determination, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I realized that I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the choices that brought me here, but I could choose what happened next. I could choose to stand up for myself, to draw a line, to demand the respect I deserved, not just from Emily, but from myself. That night, I made a decision that would change everything, not just for me, but for her as well. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The ache of betrayal was still there, but it was joined by a new sense of purpose. I'd spent too long letting life happen to me, letting others, especially Emily, make decisions on my behalf. That was over. I was done being a bystander in my own story. I started by calling Mr. Callahan, my lawyer. My voice was steady, but I could hear the steel in it. A tone I hadn't used since my working days, when I had to fight for every inch. "I need to see you," I said. Today, if possible. He must have heard something different in my voice, because he cleared his schedule and told me to come right in. Sitting across from him in his office, I laid out everything I knew. I showed him the letter, pointed out the signatures, the dates, transactions I hadn't authorized. Mr. Callahan listened carefully, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the documents. "This is serious, George," he said quietly. "If what you're saying is true, there's been a clear breach of trust and possibly fraud." I felt a surge of vindication, but also a deep sadness. I never wanted to see my daughter as an adversary, never wanted to believe she could do something so cold. But the facts were there, undeniable. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "What do we do next?" He explained the steps, how we'd need to gather every piece of evidence, every bank statement, every email and text message that could prove my case. He'd file an injunction to freeze the assets, preventing any further transfers until the matter was resolved. It would be a battle, he warned, and it might get ugly. But I was ready. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I spent the next week quietly gathering everything I could. I combed through old files, dug up correspondence, made a list of every conversation I could remember where Emily had hinted at her plans. I found copies of emails she'd sent to Mr. Callahan, using my name, but with a tone and language that didn't sound like me at all. I even discovered a few voicemails she'd left, instructing the bank to handle things as discussed. Each new piece of evidence was a small victory, a step toward reclaiming what was rightfully mine. All the while, I kept my plans to myself. Emily called once or twice, her voice as bright and breezy as ever. She asked if I needed anything, if I was feeling well, if I'd thought any more about downsizing the house. I played along, keeping my answers vague, watching her carefully. It was strange seeing her through new eyes, not as my daughter, but as someone capable of deception, out of calculated self-interest. I wondered if she sensed the change in me. She noticed the way I listened more closely, spoke less, measured my words. I started to notice things I'd missed before. The way she'd glance around the house, her eyes lingering on the furniture, the art, the family photos. The way she'd steer conversations toward money, investments, the future. She seemed so sure of herself, so certain that everything was already hers. It was as if she'd already written me out of the story, already moved on to the next chapter. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Each day, I felt myself growing stronger, more determined. I was no longer the passive, trusting father she'd always known. I was a man with a plan. A man who'd learned too late, perhaps, but learned all the same. That love without boundaries is just another form of surrender. Mr. Callahan kept me updated as the case moved forward. He filed the necessary paperwork, contacted the banks, and began the process of untangling the web Emily had spun. It was slow, painstaking work, but I was patient. I'd waited a lifetime for justice. I could wait a little longer, Through it all, I kept my routine. Morning coffee, walks in the garden, evenings on the porch. But inside, I was changing. I felt a sense of agency, a quiet pride in taking back control. I wasn't just fighting for my assets. I was fighting for my dignity, for the right to decide my own fate. Emily, for her part, seemed blissfully unaware. She went about her life, confident that her plan had worked, that her father was none the wiser. I let her believe it. I let her think she'd won, but deep down, I knew the tide was turning. I was no longer the victim of her choices. I was the author of my own story again, and I was ready to write the next chapter, one where respect, not betrayal, would have the final word. The day of the confrontation arrived with a heavy sky, clouds pressing low, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I asked Emily to come by the house, telling her there were important papers I needed her to look at. She agreed, her voice light and unconcerned, as if she was doing me a favor. I could almost hear her smile through the phone, that same confident tone she'd used so many times before. When she arrived, she swept into the living room, barely glancing at me before setting her purse on the table. "What's all this about, Dad?" "I've got a meeting in an hour." She looked at her watch, impatient. Already half out the door in her mind, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Mr. Callahan was there, seated quietly in the corner, a stack of documents in front of him. Emily's eyes flickered to him, a hint of confusion crossing her face. "Why is Mr. Callahan here?" I met her gaze, my voice calm but unyielding. "We need to talk, Emily, about the house. About my accounts. About everything you've done behind my back." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Dad, I told you I was just helping you get things in order. You're not getting any younger." And I cut her off, my words sharper than I intended. "Helping me? Is that what you call forging my signature? Transferring my assets without my knowledge? Lying to my lawyer and the bank?" Her face paled, the confidence draining away. I thought it would be easier if Mr. Callahan spoke, then, his voice measured and professional. "Emily, we have copies of every document. We have emails, voicemails, and bank records. What you did wasn't just helping, it was fraud. And there are consequences." Emily's eyes darted between us, panic rising. "Dad, please, you don't understand. I was just trying to make sure you were taken care of. I didn't want you to worry about money, about the house." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "You didn't do this for me, Emily. You did it for yourself. You saw what I had and you decided it was yours for the taking. I trusted you. I loved you. But love doesn't mean blind trust. It doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you, even if they're your own flesh and blood." Tears welled in her eyes, but I held firm. For the first time, I saw her not as my little girl, but as an adult who had made her choices and would have to live with them. "I'm taking back what's mine," I said quietly. "The house, the savings, my future. You don't get to decide for me." Not anymore. She never expected me to fight back. But I wasn't the helpless old man she thought I was. Mr. Callahan handed her the legal notice, outlining the steps we were taking to reverse the transfers and pursue restitution. Emily stared at the papers, her hands shaking. "Dad, please." I stood my ground, my voice steady. "I hope one day you understand why I had to do this. Maybe then you'll learn what respect really means." As she left, shoulders slumped and eyes downcast, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I had lost much, but I had reclaimed something far more valuable. My dignity, my self-respect, and the knowledge that, at last, I was standing up for myself in the weeks that followed. The house felt different, quieter, but lighter somehow. The legal process moved forward, and with Mr. Callahan's help, I regained control of my assets and secured my future. Emily and I spoke only through lawyers for a time, and though the silence between us was painful, it was also necessary. I realized that love, real love, sometimes means drawing a line and holding it, even when it hurts. I spent more time tending the garden, walking the old familiar paths, rediscovering the simple joys I'd set aside for so long. I found peace in the routines I'd once taken for granted, and in the knowledge that I had finally stood up for myself. I forgave Emily, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger would only weigh me down, and I was ready to move forward, lighter and wiser. Looking back, I see now that self-respect isn't selfish. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship, even with those we love most. I wish things had turned out differently with Emily, but I know I did what I had to do. I hope in time she'll understand. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, remember, you have the right to protect your heart and your future. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't let anyone, not even family, make you feel small or powerless. Stand up for yourself. You're worth it.